Welcome to a very special edition of the Brilliant Educational Series. Today we're going green. We've got Cary Krosinksy of Brown's ESG Institute, also teaches at Yale. Cary, thanks for coming on today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So tell us about the Institute at Brown.
I do three things. I teach, write, and advise on sustainable investing. Teach at Brown independently. It's a course on sustainable investing for the undergraduate students.
And so what is your full-time job?
I don't have a full-time job.
Okay, so you're just 100% immersed in ESG investing?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. Yeah, I do a variety of things, but that's certainly part of my focus.
Okay. No, wonderful. So how is the acceptance of ESG investing coming so far on Wall Street? Has it started at all, or can you give us percentages, some data points?
It's growing quite significantly. There isn't a single Wall Street firm that doesn't have a focus on this now. That would not have been true a few years ago.
Let me stop you actually. Cary, you started an institute though separate of Brown and Yale. Didn't you start an ESG institute?
Part of many things. There's something called the Sustainable Finance Institute.
Yes, the Sustainable Finance Institute. That's what you started. That's what I was getting at. Your main job.
Yeah, we largely use that as a vehicle to do work in China. Actually, we hosted an event last January in Shenzhen.
Yes, that is how it came across you from your event in Shenzhen. Now I've got
okay, cool.
Well, I did an Invest Shenzhen event with the Chinese consulate. It's a really wonderful area. I'm actually a birder myself, and Shenzhen has over 1,200 species of birds, so it's really nice. Beautiful place.
It is, absolutely. Subtropical, indeed. Yeah,
well, definitely my favorite part of China. So anyway, let's get back to Brown. Tell us about the course of Brown you're teaching.
Sure. Yeah. Basically, I teach at Yale, Brown, NYU, and elsewhere. Typically, we try to help students think through whether they think sustainable investing is something they might be interested in thinking about working in some way. We talk about the complexities. We try to look at things. We try to look at it as a bit of a kaleidoscope, which I think it is, depending on how you look at sustainability. It looks different if you're a company, or if you're an investor, or if you're a country like China or Indonesia. Sustainability issues keep looking differently depending on your perspective, is my experience. And I try to bring that thinking to my classes.
Wonderful. Sorry, well, getting back to the data points. So let's talk about Wall Street acceptance now. So tell us about these data points.
Sure. I try to think globally about these things.
One of the even better.
Yeah, one of the things, Europe's been at this for a while is sort of a cliche. Well over half of European financial institutions look at ESG. Maybe 3 to 5 years ago, it was maybe 10 to 15% of U.S. institutions on Wall Street were looking at these things. And it is 100% now. So if you're BlackRock, you have a team dedicated to 50 to 100 people working on these things. Vanguard has launched new funds. Fidelity's been looking at these things. If you look top down at the largest institutions, they all have teams looking at these things in some way to be able to respond to RFPs, changing demand of millennials. There's an expectation that as trillions of dollars change hands due to inheritance, that the Bank of America friends say that 97% of inherited assets don't stay with the relationship that was in place. So I think there's a market share, a coming market share shift that Wall Street perceives, and as a result, Goldman has a $750 billion commitment to sustainable finance. They're winning deals left and right. Every large firm has at least $100 billion commitment, if not more at this point.
Yeah. So China has a very specific interest. And I think something very interesting that I just read is that China only has 3 feet of well water on average per square foot versus over 50 feet of well water per square foot in the United States. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great pleasures of doing an event for 2 days in China last January is that we were able to feature all sorts of thinking that you might consider to be out there. We had a student who did research on diversity and presented that in China. That was really cool. Young woman. We also had China water risk give a presentation, and they've been talking about how water is going to be a major crisis in not only China, but they're expanding to India as well. People are bunched at these rivers that are going to run dry. The Himalayas, the glaciers are melting. People won't have enough drinking water. A lot of the water is not fit for drinking. The land needs to be remediated also. And China's aware of all the problems it has, and it, to some degree came from the industrialization, the outsourcing of industry here to China came with some side effects, sadly, for the countryside and the quality of the natural resources. So it's a big deal. And, for me, that's one of the reasons that the Chinese government, I think, is motivated to act, because they need to deliver a result on making these things better if they can, because the people are increasingly demanding that.
I would agree with that, actually. I've worked with the Chinese government in the limited capacity, and they have a significant desire for education. They want to do better. I can't speak to their domestic policies, of course, but from a scientific educational standpoint, they do have a drive. Maybe, there might be some nefarious actions at times, but at the same time, there are nefarious actions in every country.
Right.
We all read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, and so those
sure. Yeah, I mean, my thinking on that is, China's certainly not perfect. There are things that happen there that none of us would be necessarily happy with. But if you want to make things better, let's at least start from a position of respect and trying to collaborate and see where that takes us. And China's all about relationship building, as I'm sure you know. So if you build relationships, show respect, then you can have conversations about the things that we might not be happy about. And they'll learn and they'll adjust as they want to, for example, attract Western capital on a regular basis. They need to show that they can meet our minimum standards for that capital.
Yeah. Well, it's really amazed me how much more ESG investing has become at the forefront of my students' minds. 2 or 3 years ago, I heard nothing about it. Now it's something I hear from almost all of my students. The moral responsibilities are becoming very prevalent today, and especially in the financial world, where people talk about the race to zero. And at the end of the day, what does Fidelity or BlackRock have? They have a name, a reputation, and if they lose that, they lose the assets. And you were speaking to the 97% of inherited wealth that will leave, and if the name is tainted, that those numbers will not work in their favor. So, clearly ESG investing is something that seems to be continued proliferation would be expected.
I agree. Completely agree.
Yeah.
And it's early days, really, realistically, for, and maybe as the way I like to explain this is whenever there's a new industry, there's like a rush. You have hundreds of firms pop up. Most of them will fail. And once the new thing takes off, then you see who the winners are. And we saw it with automobiles and railroads and computers, tulips, radio. This is just the nature of things. And I think we're seeing it with sustainable investing now that, most of the new strategies may not work, but the ones that do might do really well.
The amazing thing is that, Exxon and Shell, so many of the largest, polluters are also the largest investors in R&D for sustainable investing. It's, they want to clean up their act. They know what they're doing is wrong, but that's where that's their profit center. So,
I'm with you. You'd want them to, use their engineering talent in a slightly different way over time.
Is there any industry that strikes you as one that's, not willing to change?
I think, coal production is challenged, obviously.
Of course, that's
that's the obvious one.
Yeah.
And then, when you look at Alberta and the tar sands, that people like Jeremy Grantham were talking years ago about, don't worry about that. It won't be economic, so it won't happen. And that's kind of what
floating cities. Have you ever come across floating cities? Do you have any?
Yeah, you hear about such things. Obviously, the Dutch, sort of thing. I mean,
popping up more and more on my screen, I must say.
Yeah, I think, in Dubai, there's been experimental attempts at this. And, if sea levels rise, we're going to have to do something, certainly.
Oh, well, wonderful. So I also see you started teaching at Yale. Can you tell us about that, what you're doing there?
Yeah, I teach 3 different categories of class at Yale. I'm part of the energy studies program at the college. I'm a faculty on the faculty advisory committee. I've been teaching a seminar for the last 6 years. Wonderful group of positive, practical students, actually, come through. We try to look realistically at the challenges of the energy transition. That's been very rewarding. Also, college seminars for the undergraduates, and I also teach at the School of Management.
Cary, let me stop you there and let's talk energy transition. Where do you see crude oil usage in 100 years? 10%, 50%, 30%? I mean, or are you, what are your views?
Yeah,
well.
yeah, 100 years, I think 10% is probably right.
Well, how about 10 years from now?
Yeah, 10 years from now, we're probably 90%.
Still 90% crude?
These transitions take time. That's, in the next 10 years, I would expect there'll be all sorts of radical transformation of technology, but, implementing driverless cars, that won't be easy.
Oh.
So I do think the transitions will take a while. And so 10 years, the expectation is that, technologically, there'll be a lot of advancements and we'll be in a period of change, but it would probably be more like 20 years.
Which alternative energy do you feel is least efficient and should be abandoned, if any?
Realistically, they're all viable if you get the technology right, even coal, right? So if you can capture.
What about nuclear? Are you okay with nuclear?
The more advanced forms of nuclear are showing some promise, but they're expensive. Nuclear is failing from an economic standpoint as much as anything.
Yeah, no, but the interesting thing with Fukushima, Rebellion was lucky enough to sit down with UN's lead investigator. And what we found out was that the actual harm from the nuclear facility was actually very limited. You could fish within 30 miles of there. And so all of the death and devastation was really from the flooding and the people actually dying from the tsunami itself.
Right. Well, people oversimplify the energy challenges, and I think there's a danger of oversimplification and rushing to judgment. So,
and Chernobyl was handled as badly as could possibly have been badly handled.
Right. That obviously is not something to repeat if we can help it.
Did you watch the HBO miniseries?
A little bit of it. I didn't see the whole thing.
No, it was good. It was good. It got the end was not as good as the beginning, but
right.
It was enjoyable. Well, this was a very enjoyable time, Cary. You've been a great guest, and thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me.
Do you have any parting words for our audience?
Just we're headed in a different direction, and let's all work together if we can, and recognize the complexity in things, and avoid the danger of oversimplification.
I like that. Good karma all around, definitely. So thank you, and stay safe and be well in these crazy times.
And you. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Bye now.